I mean, I think the first thing Amnesty International would concur is that long-term camps, 20, 30 years in the case of Dadaab and Kakuma, are not the solution. That ultimately the solution is for refugees to either be safe to return to their countries of origin. Of course, this has to be voluntary under the international, under international law. But secondly, that they have the opportunity to integrate in the countries in which they are settled. And I think as we now look to the 2022 June deadline that has been set, this is the new deadline that has been set by the government of Kenya. The question that we have to ask of the government of Kenya is essentially whether they can create the conditions for those refugees that have been in Kenya since they were born. And if you think about it, there's at least probably 2 generations of refugees that know no other country, and essentially repatriating them to their so-called countries of origin essentially is to take them to places and homes that they have never known. That ultimately for them, can they be given the option of integrating into Kenya and essentially choosing to become Kenyans and be naturalized in that respect, rather than returning to the countries of their grandparents.
And some have actually said that has been the challenge of the government of Kenya, even in fact as compared to Uganda and even Tanzania, that there was no policy of allowing a person to potentially become a permanent resident or even a citizen of Kenya. So should that have been even maybe the initial discussion?
No, I think it is definitely the topical discussion now. This is the conversation we need to have with the government of Kenya. I think from the donor community and from the diplomatic community in the United Nations, support should be provided for this course of action. I traveled 1 month ago to Turkana, Lodwar, to meet with the Turkana County Governor and his cabinet. And I asked him that question. I said, you have been extremely successful in reducing tensions between the South Sudanese, the Ugandan and other refugees in Kakuma with the local Turkana population. What is the secret? What is the model that we could offer the rest of the country? And he said, no, it is very simple. It is integration. It is integration. Because what you can do then is you can begin to shrink the camps and essentially give the camps a focus on the new refugees, the people who are coming across from Tigray, Ethiopia, the people who are trying to avoid violence in South Sudan, rather than essentially mingling them with people who, for all intensive purposes, know Kenya as their home. And I think that would be the progressive step to take before June next year.
Yes, I know. I did listen to one young man say he was born in Kakuma refugee camp. He doesn't know any other home. That's home to him. Now, when you talk about Dadaab specifically, it's very close to the border with Somalia. Kenya has had issues of insecurity with Somalia. Now, one of the arguments Kenya has put forth is that it's a potential, or it has been in some cases, a source of Al-Shabaab operatives, and so it needs to be closed down for security reasons. How do you make an argument against that?
Well, I mean, I think there is some validity in terms of ensuring that not just Kenyans but refugees are safe from terrorism and extremism. So it's not just that the whole camp is full of extremists. It's really that the extremists will hide among the refugees in the camp. Essentially, what has been very successful with the government over the years has been to invest a lot in civic intelligence, to increase the levels of awareness and counter-violent extremism training among not just Kenyans, but also among refugees as well. And that's how you win the war against terrorists. You don't win the war against terrorists by closing camps and sending hundreds of thousands of people back into Somalia without any capacity to sustain themselves or to make, to be able to develop their own livelihoods. If anything, you are just sending them into an environment in which they will be radicalized. And of course, now they can come back, having spent their time in Kenya and understand Kenya, and be an even bigger threat. I think the way that you do this is you essentially create development programs that leave many of the refugees with a sense of being vested in the future of Kenya. And really that Kenya, for these many, many years, has been a sanctuary country and a sanctuary nation for millions of people. And many of them now are even congressmen and women and senators in the United States of America. So it is the case that, broadly speaking, the refugee experience in Kenya has been a success, not a failure.
Yeah. And finally, on this issue, Kenya should be having a good conversation with the UN, because first, it has actually at least been sitting close to the Security Council, and also the fact that these camps are managed by the United Nations. What kind of help can the international community, the United Nations, give to Kenya to better manage these camps or close them in a more organized way that will be fair, humane, and also just acceptable internationally?
Unfortunately, despite the misery and the trauma of communities and families in flight, global humanitarian programs are grossly underfunded. And there is an expectation, I think, on the Biden-Harris administration that they will increase their funding. For many years, global humanitarian funding has really relied on a handful of countries, particularly countries like Sweden, much smaller than some of the richer countries. But I think this is what Kenya could use its moment on the Security Council to press for.